Greetings. I really found a very good place, very good exchange between people. It's between professors, theologians, and those interested in exegetical analysis of biblical texts. By the way, I was told that this music was bothering somebody, so that's why I'm using it right now, because I love it anyways. So if it bothers you, fine, I don't care either way. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. It's one of my preferred tracks of Kevin MacLeod, titled Long Road Ahead. And by the way, if you don't like my accent, I don't need you, okay? All right. So the exchange is, of course, I'm not going to read Greek words because I don't pretend to know Greek, and even less pronouncing Greek words. I just know a very few words, okay? So I'm far from knowing Greek, and therefore I will skip those words, and if this bothers you, it's not my problem. Difference between Son of Man and Son of God. The evangelists seem to have their favored ways of talking about who Jesus was. I've also noticed that one controversial thing in people's discussion on this site is the designation between Son of God over Son of Man. In John, for example, we see 13 occurrences of Son of Man and only 9 occurrences of Son of God. The evangelist appears to use them interchangeably. Even some of the manuscripts have the wording different. In John 9:35, for example, we have these variations that use a specific Greek word. I invite you to go in the link, to go to the link that will be posted in my video description for these words. So, Son of Man certainly serves as an allusion to Daniel, but is there a specific context or purpose which would have motivated the evangelist or the scribe to use one designation over the other, or are they truly interchangeable? 4 answers. The first one, the precise meaning of the phrases Son of Man and Son of God in the Gospels have been a matter of scholarly debate for 2 millennia. While it was once widely believed that both had strong messianic intentions, this view has been strongly challenged in the last century, following analysis of the wider range of literature now available from the period. Reference Dead Sea Scrolls, Nag Hammadi Library. While much remains unresolved, scholars are at least agreed that the phrases are not interchangeable. In the OP's specific example, the textual variance of John 9:35 suggests an intentional Scrabble change, not a dynamic or formal equivalence of the phrases in the minds of early Christians. Son of God, between commas, Jewish, Roman, or Christian ideals. Simply put, Son of God, between commas, describes the subject's close relation to God, though the exact nature of that relation and its implications are varied and debated. Some suggest the Greek phrase in the Gospels may retain the meaning of the similar Hebrew phrase in Jewish literature where, for example, it refers to God's divine counsel, between commas, an anointed human king, or Israelites as the children of God. Others suggest the phrase draws from the immediate Greco-Roman culture, i.e., deified a human or a human descendant of a god. And of course, many Christians have understood the gospel writers to have used the phrase as an explicit messianic or Christological claim, a divine title. Determining the precise meaning of the phrase in each of its canonical gospel uses is out of scope here. We need only note the range of possible meanings points to a special relationship with God. Son of Man, between commas, a human, what I call myself. Historically, Son of Man points in the opposite direction. The Hebrew expression Ben Adam appears 107 times in the Hebrew Bible, 93 of them in the book of Ezekiel. In the Old Testament, it simply means human being, between commas, often in abject contrast to God. Importantly, the Hebrew phrase never appears with the definite article, the Son of Man, between commas, as a title. Jews consider the expression one like a son of man, between commas, in Daniel 7:13-14, on which so much Christian eschatology is pinned, as likely referring to a messianic figure, probably an angel, but not a messianic title, according to Geza Vermes, from the completion of the book of Daniel in the 160s BC to the time of the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70, there is no attestation in extant Jewish literature of the use of Son of Man, between commas, as describing a religious function. Evangelical New Testament scholar Larry Hurtado agrees. There is in fact no evidence that the Son of Man was a fixed title, or that there was a noun figure who bore it. In ancient Jewish tradition, Hurtado describes the fixed messianic title, between commas, believed as, between commas, formerly held widely and now outdated, between commas. Certainly, it's noteworthy that there is no evidence in the New Testament that the Son of Man, between commas, ever functioned as a confessional title, unlike, for example, Messiah Christ, Lord, between commas, or Son of God, between commas, emphasis added. Instead, Hurtado writes, the phrase with the definite article seems to have been simply a distinctive, self-referential expression idiom. Vermes states, it is now generally accepted, between commas, that the Greek formula o uis tu anthropou, the Son of Man, between commas, translates the common Aramaic idiom bar, between commas, bar esnaha, or bar nasha, as speaking of oneself in the third person, equivalent to a first person pronoun. Alright. In the Galilean dialectic of Aramaic spoken by Jesus, Son of Man, between commas, sometimes appear in a monologue or dialogue as a circumlocutional reference to the speaker himself. It is not unlike the English figure of speech, yours truly, between commas, used in the place of I. The purpose of such a periphrastic style was to camouflage something fatal dreaded by the speaker, something that would sound boastful if directly asserted. So one would say in Aramaic, Son of Man is going to die, or the Son of Man is about to become king, rather than I will die or I will be proclaimed king. The suggestion that Son of Man, between commas, was a common Aramaic idiom for oneself may explain why the phrase does not appear in any of Paul's epistles, only once in Acts, in Stephen's final speech, and in two direct quotations of the Old Testament in Revelation. Almost all of the 79 or so New Testament examples of the phrase are found on the lips of Jesus in the Gospels. Son of Man of later Christian eschatology. In later decades, during the period during which the Gospels were written, the Son of Man, between commas, became a fully developed messianic character in apocryphal and deuterocanonical literature. For example, 4 Ezra 13, Parables of Enoch, 1 Enoch 37-71, paralleling, if not fully incorporating the Christ figure of Pauline Christianity. Oh, there is a Pauline Christianity. That's interesting. Continuing to read. The Gospels writers may have interpreted the Aramaic oral traditions and early written texts they inherited through the lens of these later theologies, such as Jesus' simple third-person references to himself in Aramaic, were understood or recast in their retelling between parentheses as messianic or Christological self-identification in the new charismatic texts. The historical Jesus, between commas, is difficult to discern, but the widely recognized low Christology, between commas, of Mark, though to be the earliest gospel, and the high Christology, between commas, of John, thought to be the latest, suggest a particular trajectory. While there is no scholarly consensus on the precise development of the full meaning of these phrases in the gospel texts, at no point do scholars suggest the phrases Son of God, between commas, and Son of Man, between commas, are interchangeable. Each has its distinct history, and the range of their possible meanings are increasingly complex. I will put the link in the video descriptions, and there are comments to this. I might continue later depending, but I need to stop now. Thank you for listening. I decided to read the conclusion, which is short and sweet, and I will give you the link in the video description. Conclusion. Son of God is a term used for both Yeshua and believers. It applies to those that believe in YHVH and obey him. The Son of Man is all of mankind, including Yeshua. He uses this term in parables to teach us that mankind must go through before he can be perfect, even as he is perfect, between commas, and to show us that God has planned for us. Yeshua was the first man that God accomplished in this end, and it's been his plan since the beginning. And God said, let us make accomplished man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. Genesis 1:26. By the way, I want to make a little comment here. Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion. So man includes the woman. So just to mention that Eve also had dominion over everything, just like Adam. There are many problems in the churches today. Let us accomplish man in our image. So it's not just Adam who was made at the image of God, but also Eve. Different. In John 9:35, for example, we have these variations that use a specific Greek word. I invite you to go in the link, to go to the link that will be posted in my video description for these words. So, Son of Man certainly serves as an allusion to Daniel, but is there a specific context or greetings? I really found a very good place, a very good exchange between people. It's between professors, theologians, and those interested in exegetical analysis of biblical texts. By the way, I was told that this music was bothering somebody, so that's why I'm using it right now, because I love it anyways. So if it bothers you, fine, I don't care either way. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. It's one of my preferred tracks of Kevin MacLeod, titled Long Road Ahead. And by the way, if you don't like my accent, I don't need you, okay? Alright. So the exchange is, of course, I'm not going to read Greek words because I don't pretend to know Greek, even less pronouncing Greek words. I just know a very few words, okay? So I'm far from knowing Greek, and therefore I will skip those words, and if this bothers you, it's not my problem. Difference between Son of Man and Son of God. The evangelists seem to have their favored ways of talking about who Jesus was. I've also noticed that one controversial thing in people's discussion on the site is the designation between Son of God over Son of Man. In John, for example, we see 13 occurrences of Son of Man and only 9 occurrences of Son of God. The evangelist appears to use them interchangeably. Even some of the manuscripts have the wording